So the next example we're going to do is relatively simple, but gives you an idea how you could set up different columns using Flexbox. And also, we're doing something responsive here, which is pretty useful. So if you had, some sort of nav items on the left, we could make it so that when your screen is smaller, you go from top to bottom, which makes sense. So this is what we're going to end up deriving here. I'm going to take a number of things out here, and we'll end up adding these in. So right now, if we went to look at this, we've got two divs, one right on top of the other. And what we're going to do here is let's start out by saying that if you're a div under the body, right, so this is going to be our flex container. We're going to display flex. And all that's going to do is going to put these one right next to the other. And at this point, if we looked at this, these items take up as little room as they need to take up within this flex box. So a couple of things that we could end up doing here. One of them, let's identify them a little bit better. So we'll go over here and we'll say if you're a div under the div and you're the first child, and again, we would probably end up giving these some class names. But we'll make the background color, let's pick Dodger blue. And we'll say if you are the last child, we're going to make the background color gray. So now if we take a look at this, we'll see we've got these two items right next to each other. One of the things we could end up doing is we could determine the size of them relative to each other. And you could do these. This is actually a flex property. It's called a flex grow property. And the default value is going to be 0. So if we went over here and we said, hey, Dodger blue, you're going to have a flex of 1. Since by default the other value is 0, left is going to basically push right all the way over. Well, we don't quite want to do that. Let's say we wanted to do a ratio of 3 to 1. We could say this is going to be 3. And we would have 3 to 1 ratio from the left to the right. Also, if we wanted to make sure that this went the whole height of the page, we could say, hey, look, the height of this flex box, which is going to be the parent, is going to be 100 of the view height. And now we end up going over here, which looks okay. And again, we could end up, setting things up with different columns. Of course, when we end up getting too small, this is not going to end up being great. So let's do a couple of things here. First of all, we could see what this is going to look like on a mobile device. We could do this with the Chrome developer tools. And right now when we do that, we see, hey, look, we could barely end up seeing our text here. This is something I always look up. I never remember this syntax. But this is basically a way of saying, hey, look, we want you to take into account the width of what the device is for, relative sizing. And so if you ever see things look really tiny on a mobile device, it's probably because you don't have this viewport tag in here. And again, if you forget what this is, or you do a search for viewport or meta tag, this is the first thing that comes up because I don't think anyone really memorizes this. And now I'll actually see the sizes look a little bit better. Now the last thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a media query here. And so right now by default, if I went over here and I said flex direction is going to be, instead of row, which is default, is going to be column, then I'll see that the left is on top of the right. And that might be something that I might want to do for just a mobile device. So instead of actually having this here, what I could do is put a media query here. And I'll say this is for a max width of, again, whatever values you put here. This is not all that uncommon, 600 pixels. And here I'm going to put in, hey, look, if you are this div, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to say the flex direction is going to be column, but only when you're at these smaller sizes. So now if I went back here and I refresh this, this looks good. But if I'm on a bigger screen, I end up going from left to right. Smaller screen, I go from top to bottom. So you could see how the various flex properties that allow you to determine how the flex boxes end up growing could be pretty useful in terms of column layouts, and also another example of the media query and also how the viewport ends up coming into play.